The World Agroforestry Centre, with partners working on the tropical forest margin, we had been involved in trying to understand what happens in land use in tropical forest and forest-derived systems. And we found that a lot of ecosystem services actually are still compatible with farmers, but they're not being recognized, they're not being rewarded. And when these farmers have an option to move to intensified monoculture, rubber, oil palm, well, they'll do it, and we lose a lot of the ecosystem services in that process. So we realized that, yes, we need some additional way to make it possible for farmers, make it attractive to combine ecosystem services with the products that they get paid for and have marketed. So but from the start we were quite suspicious of the term payments for ecosystem services and the definitions of that were all to make it market-based mechanisms apply to ecosystem services. About 10 years ago we were discussing with IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, on their interest in learning a broader concept of rewards. So RUPES, the R is rewarding the upland poor for the ecosystem services that they provide. And we engaged with, and we found people in many different landscapes in different countries in Asia, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Nepal, who are trying to learn how this works. They were all struggling with that definition of payment for ecosystem services, and they all felt that what they were doing made sense in their own context, but it didn't quite match the paradigm as it existed. So from that experience we say, well, rather than try to fit everyone to a definition that is made by economists on theoretical grounds, why not try to learn what people actually do and try to get names to what we see happening on the ground. So then by looking at what is it that people do, we came up with these three paradigms. Now paradigm is a big word, but there is stuff what we can call commodification. So you try to make ecosystem services into a commodity, and then people talk about the carbon market, and carbon is then ecosystem services that you can try to parcel out and like a bag of rice, sell it for a certain entity. People thought that is what we should be doing with everything. So that is that commodification. The second paradigm is one of compensation. So you compensate people for foregoing benefits from intensification in one way, but it is a compensation type of paradigm, typically for a government program that does that on behalf of its citizens. The third is co-investment, and we found, and we'll see that in a bit more detail, that most of what actually happens or what actually works on the ground has these characteristics of co-investment. Co-investment means we deal with multiple capitals. We deal with the natural capital, the social capital, the human capital, financial capital, institutional capital, physical infrastructure, and it is getting all of these different capitals aligned towards what we now call green development or sustainable development in a true sense. And okay, we talk about people in that landscape who have their own resources and their own challenges and problems, and people outside who benefit from or are interested in ecosystem services there. And it is, in a way, pooling the resources that different investors have, but then sharing the risk and sharing the benefits. So whereas commodification would move towards hard contracts, if you do this you get the money, if you don't do it you don't get the money, and that's it. In practice, and especially when poor people are involved, we need much more of a language of investment together and sharing benefits, sharing risk. But in a simple way, we say in governance issues there is, well, the carrots, the sticks and the sermons, or the rules, the incentives and the motivation. And what all three have to go together. I mean, you cannot if the rules aren't there and people aren't following the rules, you cannot provide incentives. And if it doesn't match motivation, you can't do it either. Now, in most of the rural landscapes that we find in Indonesia, Philippines, to a lesser extent in Vietnam, the rules and the legislation in this country is very much ahead of the practice. There's nice rules about almost everything, but it's not being implemented, it's not being there. There's big conflicts, contests over land. Is the forest owned by the state? Is the forest owned by the indigenous people? Is the forest managed by? If you actually look at the law, it is very unclear, and there are big gaps on that front. So if you then come with, now I have a bag of money and I'll give it to the legal provider of, well, that only leads to more problems and more challenge and more conflicts. If you go into it, okay, we know there's many problems about ownership, we know there's many problems about tenure, we know that we actually might not be all following the existing rules, but let's see what we can do about it, and where is it that an investment in specific things could help. So and to some extent it's all just a play of words. On the other hand, it matters an awful lot how you enter the discussion, and do you come in, you start talking about money and this, or you start talking about, hey, we have a problem, you have a problem, we have an opportunity, and let's sit together what we can do in pooling resources. So it is the entry point in that co-investment is a different one, and we found that, interesting enough, that as we said, that most of these programs use that language of payments for the services, and in practice what they do is actually already that co-investment. So it is trying to get the right label onto what people do, and instead of trying to get practice aligned with the definition that is, so it's a bit, the payment part is coming out of an economics paradigm. Our co-investment is much more combined with social perspectives, ecological perspectives, and yes, there is some economy in there, but it is a more multi-paradigm, multidisciplinary basis of it. And the first thing that we learned in almost any of these issues is that the people in the uplands, the people in the forest margin, they hardly count as people, they're not respected, they are not taken for full. And the first thing that needs to happen is indeed to get people to sit around the table and to respect each other. And that first element, is sort of a natural when you talk about co-investment. Well, you have to see it as a partnership, you have to recognize each other, respect. And that's where we see a lot of progress in trying that label. So our simple story is not, we don't need to change much in what happens on the ground, but we need to make sure that the language that we use to describe it is appropriate, and that the criteria that we use to evaluate success and learnings are matching that reality that we know actually already exists, because it is natural for people to approach things in that way, and it's natural for people to actually want to sit together and find common solutions to it.